Standing in my childhood living room surrounded by extended family during our annual reunion, I never expected my mother to point directly at me and declare to everyone, "She's this family's mistake." The room fell silent. Cousins stared. Aunts gasped. My father looked away. 26 years of feeling like the outsider suddenly made sense, but nothing prepared me for what I discovered next. Because when I finally decided to dig into why I was always treated differently, I uncovered a family secret so explosive it would destroy everything they built on lies. Before we dive into this wild family revenge story, drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. If you're ready to see how this family betrayal unfolds and how justice gets served cold, smash that like button and hit subscribe because this story has more twists than a soap opera. The humiliation at the family reunion was my breaking point. For 26 years, I had endured subtle jabs, exclusion from family photos, and that constant feeling that I did not belong. But hearing my mother, Patricia, announce to 30 relatives that I was this family's mistake shattered whatever loyalty I had left. My name is Serafina, and I had always been the black sheep. While my younger brother Marcus got praised for every minor achievement, my accomplishments were dismissed or ignored. When I graduated summa cum laude from Northwestern, my parents attended Marcus's high school baseball game instead. When I landed my dream job at a prestigious marketing firm in Chicago, they forgot to congratulate me but threw a party when Marcus made varsity football. The morning after the reunion, I sat in my downtown apartment staring at my reflection and wondering what made me so fundamentally wrong in their eyes. I had my father's dark hair and my mother's green eyes, but somehow I never fit their perfect family portrait. That afternoon, I called my grandmother Helen, my father's mother, who had always been kinder to me than the rest of the family. At 92, she was sharp as ever and lived in a senior community about an hour away. "Grandma Helen, can I ask you something that might sound strange?" I began, my voice shaking. "Of course, sweetheart. What's troubling you?" "Yesterday, Mom said something that really hurt me. She called me the family's mistake in front of everyone. I need to know why I'm treated so differently. Am I adopted? Is there something about my birth that I should know?" The silence stretched so long I thought the call had dropped. "Helen, are you there? Serafina, honey," she finally whispered. "I think it's time you knew the truth. Can you come visit me today?" This isn't a conversation for the phone. 3 hours later, I sat in her cozy living room, surrounded by family photos that notably excluded me from most recent gatherings. Helen brought out a shoebox I had never seen before. "Your mother made me promise never to tell you this, but after what she said yesterday, I cannot stay silent anymore." Helen's hands trembled as she opened the box. "You're not adopted, sweetheart. You're not their mistake either. You're the proof of the biggest lie this family has been living." She handed me a manila envelope yellowed with age. Inside were documents that made my world tilt off its axis. Birth certificate, Serafina Rose Mitchell. Father James Mitchell. Mother Patricia Ann Mitchell, née Davidson. But underneath was another document. A paternity test dated 1 month after my birth. The results showed that James Mitchell, the man I called Dad my entire life, was not my biological father. "Your mother had an affair," Helen said gently. "With her boss at the accounting firm where she worked before you were born. James found out about the affair, and when you were born, he demanded a paternity test. When it confirmed you weren't his, he wanted to leave Patricia, but she begged him to stay, promised it meant nothing, and convinced him that keeping you would prove he was the bigger person." My hands shook as I processed this information. So I'm living proof of Mom's betrayal. To James, yes. And Patricia has resented you for existing because every time he looks at you, he remembers her infidelity. She's projected her shame onto you for 26 years. "Who is my biological father?" I asked, though I dreaded the answer. Helen pulled out another document. "Richard Blackwood. He was a partner at the accounting firm. Very wealthy, very married. After the affair, he transferred Patricia to a different department and eventually bought her silence with a generous severance package when she quit. I stared at the name on the paper. Richard Blackwood. I knew that name. He was now the CEO of Blackwood Financial, one of the largest investment firms in Illinois. I had seen him in business magazines and news articles. He had 3 legitimate children who were all successful and well known in Chicago society. Does he know about me? Patricia told him she was pregnant, but he denied the baby was his and threatened to destroy her career if she ever contacted him again. She never pursued it because James had agreed to raise you as his own. The pieces fell into place like a devastating puzzle. My childhood suddenly made perfect sense. James's coldness, Patricia's resentment, Marcus being the golden child because he was their legitimate son born 3 years later. Grandma Helen, why are you telling me this now? She reached across and took my hands. Because you deserve to know the truth. Because what Patricia did yesterday was cruel and unforgivable. And because Richard Blackwood is not the man everyone thinks he is. I've been watching his career for years, wondering if he would ever try to find you. He built his fortune on lies, just like your parents built their marriage on them. What do you mean? 3 months ago, there was a small article in the business section about irregularities in Blackwood Financial's pension fund management. The investigation was dropped quickly, but I kept the article. Richard Blackwood has been stealing from retirees for years, and his family's wealth is built on fraud. My mind raced with possibilities. My biological father was not only a man who had abandoned me before birth, but apparently a criminal. My mother had been complicit in covering up his crimes by accepting hush money, and the man who raised me resented my existence because I was living proof of the betrayal that destroyed his trust in his wife. But I also realized something else. If Richard Blackwood was stealing from pension funds, I had the marketing and financial analysis skills to prove it, and I had every reason in the world to want him exposed. Grandma Helen, can I keep these documents? They're yours, sweetheart. I should have given them to you years ago. As I drove back to Chicago that evening, my hurt began transforming into something else entirely. Anger, determination, a burning need for justice. My family had spent my entire life making me feel worthless because of secrets and lies they were all complicit in maintaining. My biological father had built an empire on stolen money from hardworking people. My mother had taken bribes to stay quiet about his crimes. For 26 years, I had been the victim of their choices, but I was done being their victim. It was time to become their reckoning. The next morning, I called in sick to work and began the most important research project of my life. Armed with Richard Blackwood's name and Grandma Helen's suspicions about his business practices, I dove into every public record news article and financial report I could find. My marketing background had taught me how to analyze data patterns and identify inconsistencies in financial communications. What I discovered in Blackwood Financial's public filings made my blood run cold. Richard Blackwood had not just stolen from one pension fund. Over the past 15 years, he had systematically embezzled from dozens of retirement accounts, primarily targeting blue-collar workers and small business employees. His method was sophisticated. He would invest their money in legitimate funds, then gradually transfer portions to shell companies he controlled, replacing the stolen amounts with high-risk investments that often failed. When the investments tanked, he would claim market volatility and offer small settlements to avoid lawsuits. Most retirees, desperate and unable to afford legal battles, accepted whatever they could get. But the evidence was buried in complex financial jargon and spread across multiple subsidiaries. No wonder the previous investigation had been dropped. You would need extensive financial analysis skills and unlimited time to piece together the full scope of his crimes. Fortunately for justice, and unfortunately for Richard Blackwood, I had both. I spent 3 days mapping out his criminal enterprise using spreadsheets and databases, cross-referencing client complaints with investment timelines and subsidiary formations. The pattern became crystal clear. Richard Blackwood had stolen approximately $47 million over 15 years, leaving hundreds of families without adequate retirement funds. Meanwhile, His own family lived in luxury. His legitimate children attended elite private schools and Ivy League universities. His wife served on charity boards and collected expensive art. Their vacation home in Martha's Vineyard was featured in Architectural Digest, all funded by the retirement savings of teachers, factory workers, and small business owners. But I needed more than spreadsheets to bring him down. I needed someone inside his organization to confirm my findings and provide additional evidence. That's when I remembered Marcus mentioning that his girlfriend Emma worked at an accounting firm that sometimes contracted with investment companies. Emma and I had never been close because of my family's treatment of me, but she was smart and had always seemed uncomfortable with how they excluded me from family events. I decided to take a risk and reach out to her. Emma, this is Serafina. I know this is unusual, but I need to ask you a huge favor that might sound crazy. Serafina, hi. What's going on? I'm investigating some financial irregularities at Blackwood Financial. I can't explain why right now, but it's personal and it's important. Do you have any contacts there or access to their internal documents? Emma was quiet for a moment. Actually, my firm just started auditing some of their subsidiary accounts. I'm not supposed to talk about client information, but if there are actual irregularities, that's different. Are we talking about criminal activity? Massive pension fund fraud, tens of millions stolen from retirees over the past 15 years. Oh my God, Serafina, I just reviewed some accounts that look suspicious, but my supervisor told me to focus on other areas. If what you're saying is true, we need to report this immediately. Emma, I need to ask you something else that's going to sound insane. Can you trust me enough to meet in person? There's something about my family that you need to know that explains why I'm the one investigating this. We met at a coffee shop in downtown Chicago the next evening. I showed Emma the paternity test and birth certificate, watching her face change from confusion to shock to anger. Richard Blackwood is your biological father, and your family has known this your whole life. Worse than that, my mother took hush money from him to keep quiet about the affair. She's been complicit in covering up his crimes for over 20 years. Emma stared at the documents. Marcus doesn't know. Nobody knows except my grandmother and now you. Marcus has no idea why our parents always treated me differently. He probably thinks it's normal family dynamics. This is unbelievable. Your own mother humiliated you in front of everyone to protect a criminal who abandoned you and stole money from innocent people. Exactly. And now I'm going to make sure everyone faces consequences for their choices. Emma leaned forward. What do you need from me? Internal documents that corroborate my analysis, client complaints that were buried, any communication between Blackwood and his co-conspirators, and I need someone with legitimate credentials to verify my findings. I can do that, but Serafina, once we expose this, there's no going back. Your family will know you were behind it. Good. It's time they learned that their mistake turned out to be their biggest threat. Over the next week, Emma secretly copied relevant documents and confirmed my analysis. The evidence was overwhelming. Richard Blackwood had not only stolen millions from retirees, but had also bribed officials to avoid investigations and intimidated victims into accepting inadequate settlements. More shocking was what Emma discovered in the personnel files. Patricia Mitchell, my mother, had been receiving annual payments of $20,000 from Blackwood Financial for 26 years. The payments were listed as consulting fees, but the dates corresponded exactly with my birthday each year. My mother had been taking blood money for my entire life, getting paid to keep quiet about crimes that devastated hundreds of families. But the most damning evidence was a recorded phone conversation Emma found in the legal department's files. Richard Blackwood discussing with his attorney how to handle the Mitchell situation permanently if I ever tried to contact him. He knew I existed. He had been monitoring my family for years, and he had been planning ways to silence me if I ever became a problem. That conversation changed everything. This was no longer just about exposing a financial criminal or getting justice for his victims. This was about a powerful man who had abandoned his daughter and then spent decades plotting to destroy her if she ever threatened his carefully constructed life. But Richard Blackwood had made one crucial mistake. He had underestimated the intelligence and determination of the daughter he threw away. He had no idea that his mistake had grown up to be exactly the kind of person who could bring down his entire criminal empire. As Emma and I organized our evidence into a comprehensive report, I felt a satisfaction I had never experienced before. For the first time in my life, being the outsider in my family was about to become my greatest advantage. They had spent 26 years making me feel like I did not belong. Now I was going to show them exactly why that was the best thing that ever happened to me. The turning point came when I realized I needed to confront my family before exposing Richard Blackwood. They deserved to know that their years of lies and cruelty were about to catch up with them, and I wanted to see their faces when they realized the daughter they had dismissed was about to destroy everything they had built on deception. I planned the confrontation carefully. Sunday family dinner at my parents' house was mandatory for Marcus, but optional for me. For months I had been declining their half-hearted invitations, but this time I called Patricia directly. "Mom, I'd like to come to Sunday dinner this week. I have something important to share with the family." The surprise in her voice was obvious. "Oh, well, of course, sweetheart. Is everything all right?" "Everything is about to be perfect." That Sunday, I arrived at the house where I had grown up feeling unwanted and unloved. Marcus was already there with Emma, who gave me a subtle nod of support. My father, James, sat in his usual chair, barely acknowledging my presence. Patricia bustled around the kitchen, clearly nervous about whatever I planned to announce. "Serafina, you look well," James said stiffly. "How's work?" "Work is excellent, actually. I've been involved in a fascinating financial analysis project that's about to make national headlines." Marcus perked up with interest. "Really? What kind of project?" "The kind that exposes criminals who steal money from hardworking families and destroy their retirement security." Patricia dropped a serving spoon, the clatter echoing through the suddenly tense room. "That sounds intense," Marcus continued, oblivious to our mother's reaction. "Are you working with law enforcement?" "Very soon. But first I wanted to share some family history that I recently learned. It explains so much about our family dynamics over the years." I pulled out the manila envelope and placed it on the dining room table. 26 years ago, Mom had an affair with her boss, Richard Blackwood. I am the result of that affair. The silence was deafening. Marcus looked confused, James's face turned red with anger, and Patricia went completely white. James isn't my biological father, which explains why he's treated me like an unwanted burden my entire life. Patricia has been ashamed of me because I'm living proof of her betrayal. And Richard Blackwood, my real father, has been paying Mom hush money for over 2 decades to keep quiet about my existence. "Serafina, stop," Patricia whispered. "Please don't do this." "Do what, Mom?" "Tell the truth. The truth you've been hiding while taking $20,000 every year from a man who's been systematically stealing from retirees." Marcus looked back and forth between us. "Wait, what, Mom, is this true?" James finally spoke, his voice cold and controlled. "Your sister has always had an overactive imagination and a tendency toward drama. I think she should leave now." "Oh, I'm leaving. But not because you're asking me to. I'm leaving because I have a press conference to attend tomorrow morning where I'll be presenting evidence of Richard Blackwood's crimes to federal investigators." Patricia stood up so quickly her chair fell backward. "You can't do this. You don't understand what you're destroying." "I understand perfectly. I'm destroying a criminal enterprise built on stolen retirement funds. I'm destroying a family built on lies and cruelty. And I'm destroying the comfortable life you've all built while treating me like garbage for being the victim of choices you made." "The money he gave us helped pay for this house, for Marcus's education, for everything." Patricia was crying now. "If you expose him, they'll come after us too." "Good. You deserve whatever consequences come from being complicit in his crimes." Marcus looked stunned. "Mom, you've been taking money from Serafina's biological father this whole time, and he's a criminal." "It wasn't supposed to be like this," Patricia sobbed. The affair was a mistake, but when Richard gave me the severance package, he said it was to help with raising you. Then when you were born, and James demanded the paternity test, Richard started sending annual payments. He said it was child support. Child support? I laughed bitterly. He denied I was his daughter and threatened to destroy your career if you ever contacted him. The payments weren't child support, they were bribes to keep you quiet about his crimes. James finally exploded. Do you have any idea what this will do to our reputation? To Marcus's future? You're going to destroy this entire family for your petty revenge. Petty revenge, James. This man has stolen $47 million from people who trusted him with their life savings. There are 70-year-old women working at grocery stores because Richard Blackwood stole their pensions. There are men who should be enjoying retirement, but instead are working construction jobs because he gambled away their nest eggs. And what about us? Patricia demanded. What about your family? You stopped being my family the moment you decided to humiliate me in front of everyone, rather than face the consequences of your own actions. You've spent my entire life making me pay for your mistakes. Now it's your turn to pay for mine. Emma finally spoke up. Marcus, there's something else you should know. The evidence Serafina has gathered is rock solid. The FBI is already investigating based on preliminary information. This is happening whether your parents cooperate or not. Marcus turned to his girlfriend in shock. You're involved in this too. I helped verify the financial evidence. Marcus, your sister, is a hero. She's exposing massive fraud that has destroyed hundreds of families. The fact that it personally affects your family doesn't make it wrong. But Mom and Dad could go to prison. They should go to prison, I said firmly. Patricia took bribes to cover up crimes. James helped launder the money by using it for household expenses and Marcus's education. They're both accessories to fraud. Serafina, please, Patricia begged. He's your father. Richard is your biological father. How can you do this to your own family? Richard Blackwood abandoned me before I was born and has spent 26 years pretending I don't exist while paying you to keep quiet. You've spent 26 years making me feel worthless while taking money stolen from innocent people. James has spent 26 years treating me like a burden because his ego couldn't handle raising another man's child. I stood up and gathered my papers. None of you are my family. Family protects each other, supports each other, and loves unconditionally. What you've given me is resentment, shame, and cruelty. Where will you go? Marcus asked quietly. What will you do? I'll build a real family with people who actually care about me. I'll use my skills to help the victims Richard Blackwood destroyed get some justice. And I'll sleep better at night knowing I chose truth over comfortable lies. As I headed toward the door, Patricia made one last desperate plea. If you do this, we can never forgive you. You'll lose all of us forever. I turned around and smiled. You can't lose something you never really had. The only thing I'm losing is the weight of pretending you ever actually loved me. And Serafina, James called out as I opened the front door. Don't expect us to visit you in prison when this all backfires. The only people going to prison are the ones who committed crimes. But thanks for the final confirmation that you never saw me as anything more than a problem to be solved. I walked out of that house feeling lighter than I had in years. Behind me I could hear Patricia crying and Marcus asking confused questions. But for the first time in my life, their drama was no longer my responsibility. Tomorrow I would watch Richard Blackwood's empire crumble. His legitimate children would learn their trust funds came from stolen money. His wife would discover her charity work was funded by fraud. And my adoptive family would face the consequences of 26 years of complicity in his crimes. Justice was about to be served, and I was going to savor every moment of it. The press conference was scheduled for 9 in the morning at the Federal Building in downtown Chicago. Emma and I arrived early carrying boxes of evidence that would dismantle Richard Blackwood's criminal empire piece by piece. FBI agent Sarah Martinez had been coordinating with us for the past week, and her excitement about the case was obvious. This is the most comprehensive financial fraud case we've seen in decades, Agent Martinez told us as we set up the presentation materials. Your analysis uncovered patterns that three previous investigations missed. The conference room filled with reporters from major news outlets, federal investigators, and representatives from the Securities and Exchange Commission. I had prepared extensively for this moment, but seeing the gravity of the situation made my heart race with nervous energy. At exactly 9 o'clock, Agent Martinez introduced me to the room full of people who would help bring down my biological father. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like you to meet Serafina Mitchell, the financial analyst whose investigation has uncovered what we believe to be one of the largest pension fund fraud schemes in Illinois history. I stepped up to the podium thinking about all the years I had felt powerless and invisible in my own family. Today, I was about to become the most important person in Richard Blackwood's nightmare. Good morning. Over the past 2 weeks, I have compiled evidence showing that Richard Blackwood, CEO of Blackwood Financial, has systematically stolen approximately $47 million from retirement accounts over 15 years. His victims include teachers, factory workers, nurses, and small business owners who trusted him with their life savings. I began presenting the evidence methodically. Financial records showing money being transferred from legitimate pension funds to shell companies. Client complaints that were buried or dismissed. Forged documents claiming market losses when the money had actually been stolen. Bank records proving that Blackwood had purchased luxury properties and funded his family's lifestyle with stolen funds. But the most damning evidence came near the end of my presentation. Mr. Blackwood's crimes extend beyond theft. He has systematically intimidated victims, bribed officials to avoid investigations, and maintained a network of accomplices who helped hide his criminal activity. I displayed copies of Patricia's payment records on the large screen. For 26 years, Richard Blackwood has been paying my mother, Patricia Mitchell, $20,000 annually to maintain her silence about his crimes. These payments were disguised as consulting fees, but they were actually bribes to prevent her from reporting his illegal activities. The room erupted with questions from reporters. Agent Martinez allowed a few before continuing with the presentation. "How did you discover this connection to your mother?" asked a reporter from the Chicago Tribune. "Richard Blackwood is my biological father. He abandoned me before birth and has spent my entire life paying my mother to pretend I don't exist while he continued stealing from hardworking families." The revelation sent shockwaves through the room. Here was not just a financial crime story, but a deeply personal tale of abandonment, betrayal, and ultimate justice. As I continued presenting evidence, my phone started buzzing with messages. Word was spreading quickly through social media and news networks. By the time the press conference ended 2 hours later, Richard Blackwood's name was trending nationally. But the real satisfaction came when Agent Martinez informed me that federal agents were simultaneously executing search warrants at Blackwood Financial Richard's home and Patricia's house. "They're seizing all financial records, computer systems, and any evidence of the conspiracy," she explained. "Based on your evidence, we expect to make arrests within 48 hours. That afternoon, I watched news coverage from my apartment as reporters gathered outside Blackwood Financial's headquarters. Richard Blackwood emerged from the building surrounded by lawyers, his face pale and drawn. For 26 years, this man had lived comfortably, knowing he had abandoned his daughter and stolen from innocent people. Today, his comfortable world was crashing down around him. The news anchors described him as a prominent businessman and respected member of Chicago society. They mentioned his charitable contributions and his family's social standing. But they also detailed the evidence of his crimes and the personal story of the daughter who brought him down. My phone rang constantly with interview requests from news outlets, but I only accepted one. The Chicago Sun-Times wanted to do a feature story about the personal side of the investigation. "This must feel like vindication after years of being treated poorly by your family," the reporter suggested during our interview. "This isn't about vindication for me personally," I replied. "This is about justice for the hundreds of families whose retirement security was destroyed by Richard Blackwood's greed. The fact that he happens to be my biological father just gave me additional motivation to ensure he couldn't escape consequences anymore." What message do you have for other victims of financial fraud who might feel powerless against wealthy criminals? Document everything. Ask questions when investment returns seem too good to be true. And remember that criminals like Richard Blackwood count on victims staying silent out of shame or intimidation. Your voice matters, and there are people who will listen if you speak up. That evening, Marcus called me for the first time since the family dinner confrontation. Serafina, I need you to know that I had no idea about any of this. The money Mom was receiving Dad's treatment of you, the reason you were always excluded from family events. I thought it was just typical family dynamics. I know, Marcus. You're not responsible for their choices. The FBI searched the house today. They took boxes of documents and Mom's computer. She's been crying for hours and Dad is talking about hiring criminal defense attorneys. Good. They're going to need them. Are you sure about this? Once they're arrested, there's no going back. This will destroy our family forever. Marcus. Our family was destroyed 26 years ago when they chose lies over truth and cruelty over love. I'm just making sure everyone faces the consequences of those choices. Emma told me about all the evidence you found. She says you're absolutely right about everything. But I keep thinking about Christmas mornings and family vacations. Weren't there any good times? There were good times for you, Marcus, because you belonged. I spent those same Christmas mornings and family vacations feeling like an outsider because I was never allowed to truly belong. Now I understand why. What happens now? Now Richard Blackwood goes to prison for stealing from retirees. Patricia and James face charges for money laundering and conspiracy. And I start building a life surrounded by people who actually want me in it. Will I ever see you again? That depends on whether you can accept that your parents are criminals who spent my entire life making me pay for their mistakes. If you can handle that truth, then maybe we can have a relationship based on honesty, instead of lies. After hanging up with Marcus, I sat in my apartment watching the sunset over Chicago. Tomorrow, Richard Blackwood would wake up to federal agents arresting him for crimes that would send him to prison for decades. Patricia would learn that 26 years of taking bribes had consequences she never imagined. James would discover that his resentment toward an innocent child had made him complicit in massive fraud. And I would wake up knowing that justice was finally being served to people who had spent my entire life believing they were untouchable. The arrests happened faster than I expected. At 6 in the morning on Tuesday, just 3 days after my press conference, my phone rang with a call from Agent Martinez. Richard Blackwood was arrested at his home 20 minutes ago. Your mother and stepfather are being taken into custody as we speak. I thought you should know before you see it on the news. I turned on the television to see live footage of Richard being led out of his mansion in handcuffs. His wife stood in the doorway crying and shouting questions at the federal agents. Their 3 legitimate children had gathered on the front lawn looking confused and devastated as their privileged world collapsed around them. The news reporter explained that Richard was being charged with wire fraud, mail fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy to commit theft from employee benefit plans. The charges carried a potential sentence of up to 150 years in federal prison. Separate footage showed Patricia and James being arrested at their house. Patricia was sobbing as agents handcuffed her while James stared straight ahead with the same cold expression he had worn throughout my childhood. Marcus stood in the background, clearly in shock as he watched his parents being loaded into federal vehicles. My phone started ringing immediately. Emma called first. Serafina, are you watching the news? It's incredible. They're calling this one of the biggest financial fraud cases in Illinois history. I'm watching. How are you feeling about all this? Honestly, I'm proud of you. You brought down criminals who destroyed hundreds of lives. The fact that they happen to be your family doesn't make it wrong. Have you talked to Marcus? He's not handling it well. He keeps saying he can't believe his parents are criminals. But Emma, he needs to understand that loving someone doesn't mean protecting them from the consequences of their actions. And the next call came from Grandma Helen. Sweetheart, I just saw the news. How are you holding up? I'm doing well, Grandma. Better than I've felt in years, actually. Good. I've been waiting 26 years for Richard Blackwood to face justice for what he did to you and your mother. though I never imagined Patricia would end up being arrested too. She made her choice when she took the first bribe payment 26 years ago. Every year after that, she chose money over doing the right thing. Have you heard from the victims' families yet? I had received dozens of calls and emails from people whose retirement funds had been stolen by Richard. Their stories were heartbreaking, but also inspiring. Many had been living in poverty because of his crimes, working well past retirement age or relying on their children for financial support. Mrs. Dorothy Patterson, a 73-year-old retired teacher, called me crying, "Miss Mitchell, because of your courage, maybe I can finally stop working at the grocery store and get the medical care I need. Richard Blackwood stole my pension 15 years ago, and I've been too ashamed to tell my children why I can't afford my medications." These conversations reminded me why exposing Richard had been the right choice regardless of the personal cost. The media coverage intensified throughout the week. Richard's legitimate children gave tearful interviews claiming they had no knowledge of their father's crimes. His wife hired her own attorney and filed for divorce, trying to protect whatever assets she could from federal seizure. But the most satisfying development came when the FBI announced they had recovered almost $30 million in stolen funds from various accounts controlled by Richard and his shell companies. While not everything could be recovered, hundreds of victims would receive significant restitution. Meanwhile, Patricia and James's legal situation grew worse daily. Their attorney, a public defender since their assets had been frozen, advised them to consider plea agreements in exchange for cooperation with the federal investigation. Marcus visited me the following weekend, looking exhausted and defeated. "I don't know how to process any of this," he admitted. "My entire life has been a lie. The house I grew up in, my college education, everything was paid for with stolen money." "Marcus, you were a child. You're not responsible for their choices." "But I benefited from those choices. While you were being treated like garbage, I was being spoiled with money stolen from people who needed it for retirement." "That's true, but now you have a choice about what kind of person you want to be going forward." "What do you mean?" "You can spend your energy feeling sorry for yourself because your comfortable life was built on lies, or you can use this experience to become someone who stands up for truth and justice, even when it's difficult." "The FBI wants to interview me about what I knew about the money. I told them I thought Dad just made good investments, but they want me to review financial documents and family conversations." "Tell them the truth, Marcus, all of it. Even if it makes things worse for Mom and Dad. Especially then. They've spent 26 years teaching me that family loyalty means protecting lies and enabling bad behavior. But real family loyalty means holding each other accountable and refusing to participate in harmful actions. Emma said you might be willing to help me understand the financial evidence so I can give better testimony." I studied my brother's face, seeing genuine remorse and a desire to do the right thing. "I'll help you. But Marcus, you need to understand that cooperating with the FBI means accepting that Patricia and James are criminals. There's no middle ground here." "I know, and I want to help the people they hurt get justice." Over the following days, I helped Marcus review family financial records and prepare for his FBI interview. He discovered that he had unknowingly signed documents that helped his parents launder money from Richard. His college fund had been partially funded with stolen pension money. The revelation devastated him, but it also strengthened his resolve to cooperate fully with investigators. "I want to do whatever I can to help the victims," he told Agent Martinez during his interview, "even if it means my parents go to prison for longer." Patricia's attorney attempted to contact me through intermediaries, hoping I would speak to prosecutors on her behalf. The message was that she was sorry for how she had treated me and hoped I could find forgiveness. My response was simple. If she's truly sorry, she'll plead guilty, return every penny she received from Richard Blackwood, and serve whatever sentence the court deems appropriate. Apologies without accountability are meaningless. By the end of the month, Richard Blackwood's empire had completely collapsed. His investment firm was under federal control, his assets were being liquidated to pay restitution to victims, and his reputation was destroyed beyond repair. More importantly, the investigation had uncovered additional crimes involving other investment firms and pension fund administrators. My decision to expose Richard had triggered a much larger federal investigation into retirement fund fraud throughout the Midwest. The girl who had been called this family's mistake had become the catalyst for one of the most significant financial crime prosecutions in recent history. 6 months after the arrests, I sat in a federal courtroom watching Richard Blackwood receive his sentence. The judge, a stern woman in her 60s, had listened to 3 days of victim impact statements before delivering her verdict. Mr. Blackwood, your crimes represent a profound betrayal of trust that has devastated hundreds of families. You stole the retirement security of people who worked their entire lives to earn modest nest eggs, then used that stolen money to fund an extravagant lifestyle for yourself and your family. Richard stood with his shoulders slumped, a stark contrast to the confident businessman who had once appeared in magazine articles about successful Chicago entrepreneurs. The court sentences you to 37 years in federal prison, followed by 5 years of supervised release. You are ordered to pay full restitution of $47 million to your victims. Joe, at 62 years old, Richard Blackwood would spend the rest of his life in prison for the crimes that had funded his empire. The biological father who had abandoned me before birth would die behind bars knowing that his forgotten daughter had been the architect of his downfall. Patricia's sentencing had taken place the week before. She received 8 years for money laundering and conspiracy, along with an order to forfeit the house and all assets purchased with Richard's blood money. James got 5 years for his role in laundering the funds through family expenses. Watching them led away in chains should have felt more satisfying than it did. Instead, I felt a profound sense of closure and relief that their ability to hurt people had finally ended. The real satisfaction came from the victim restitution ceremony 2 weeks later. Mrs. Patterson, the retired teacher who had been working at a grocery store, received a check for $143,000 representing the pension money Richard had stolen from her 15 years earlier. "Ms. Mitchell," she said through tears as she hugged me, "you gave me my dignity back. I can finally retire with honor and get the medical care I need." Similar scenes played out with dozens of other victims. While not everyone could be made completely whole, the federal asset seizure had recovered enough money to provide substantial restitution to most of Richard's victims. Marcus had testified against his parents in exchange for immunity from prosecution. The experience had changed him fundamentally. He broke up with Emma not because of any problem between them, but because he needed time to rebuild his identity separate from his family's crimes. "I want to go back to school and study social work," he told me over coffee one afternoon. "I want to spend my life helping people instead of benefiting from hurting them." "That sounds like a good plan. Have you decided what you'll do about the house?" Since Patricia and James were in prison and their assets had been seized, Marcus was essentially homeless. He had been staying with friends while figuring out his next steps. "I'm going to let the feds sell it and use the money for victim restitution. I don't want anything that was bought with stolen money." "I'm proud of you for making that choice. Serafina, I need to ask you something. Do you think you'll ever be able to forgive Mom and Dad for how they treated you?" "Forgiveness isn't something I owe them, Marcus. They made deliberate choices to hurt me for 26 years while enriching themselves from criminal activity. But I'm not carrying anger about it anymore because I've built a life I actually love." And that was true. In the months following the investigation, I had received job offers from several federal agencies impressed by my financial analysis skills. I accepted a position with the FBI's white-collar crime division, where I would help investigate other cases of financial fraud. More importantly, I had connected with other victims of family betrayal through support groups and online communities. I discovered that my experience, while unique in its details, was part of a larger pattern of family systems built on secrets, lies, and scapegoating. Emma and I had become genuine friends, bonded by our shared commitment to truth and justice. She had left her accounting firm to work for a nonprofit organization that provided financial literacy education to low-income communities. You know what I realized, she said during one of our weekly dinners? Your family spent so much energy making you feel like you didn't belong that they missed out on knowing an incredible person. Their loss is my gain. I get to choose my family now, and I'm choosing people who actually value honesty and kindness. Grandma Helen had moved to a senior living community closer to my apartment so we could spend more time together. At 93, she remained sharp and continued to express regret about keeping the family secrets for so long. I should have told you the truth years ago, she said during one of our visits. Maybe, but I don't think I would have been ready to handle it until now. Everything happened when it was supposed to. The most unexpected development came when Richard's legitimate children reached out to me through their attorney. His eldest daughter, Catherine, wanted to meet her half-sister and apologize for their father's actions. We met at a quiet restaurant downtown, and I was surprised by how nervous she seemed. I wanted you to know that we had no idea about the stolen money or about you, she began. Our father was a stranger to us in many ways, but we never imagined he was capable of something like this. I don't hold you responsible for his choices. You were children when most of these crimes occurred. We've decided to donate our inheritance to a fund for white-collar crime victims. We don't want money that came from hurting innocent people. That's a generous decision. We'd also like to get to know you if you're open to it. You're our sister, and we'd like to have a relationship with you that isn't based on lies and secrets. I agreed to explore a relationship with Richard's other children, cautiously optimistic about the possibility of having siblings who valued honesty over protecting comfortable illusions. As I reflect on this entire experience, I realize that being called this family's mistake was actually the greatest gift Patricia could have given me. It forced me to examine the lies that had shaped my entire life and gave me the motivation to seek truth and justice regardless of the personal cost. The family that raised me chose cruelty, dishonesty, and criminal complicity. But I've built a chosen family of people who value integrity, compassion, and accountability. Have you ever had to choose between family loyalty and doing what's right? Have you experienced the kind of family betrayal that makes you question everything you thought you knew about the people who raised you? I'd love to hear your thoughts and experiences in the comments below, because these stories of overcoming family toxicity and finding justice remind us that we're not alone in these struggles. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life justice stories. Share this with anyone who needs to hear that sometimes the family's mistake turns out to be the family's salvation. Thank you for joining me on this journey from humiliation to vindication. Remember that your worth isn't determined by how your family treats you, and sometimes the most loving thing you can do is hold people accountable for their harmful actions, even when those people share your DNA. Until next time, keep fighting for truth and justice, and never let anyone convince you that you're less valuable because you refuse to participate in their lies.